Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is The Punisher, played by Jon Bernthal. I think that's the pronunciation. I misspelt his name yesterday when I was reviewing him with Blade, but the last spelling of his name, I think it's Bernthal. But when I spelt it, I missed out the A, but it was getting on yesterday to being quite late, so I thought I'll just correct that. But this is a kind of a martial arts pose similar to Daredevil, but he's not really a martial artist. I'm sure he's got a few techniques, but he's more a meat and potatoes man, as I call it, a brawler, and will use any method he can to beat his opponent. So I thought I'll get that pose on camera just to demonstrate that he can kind of do the sort of things the Daredevil figure does, and I do like that dynamic. So I'll move it to another pose and we'll talk a bit more about the Punisher. So stay tuned. So he's now back on 2 feet, and what I've tried to do is have him sort of looking down at his imaginary victim, and he's about to give him a pounding with that fist there, as you can see, and that gesture hand is just stretching out towards him, the victim. I quite like the dynamic. There's a little bit of movement there. And before we move on with this review, I'll just show you that DVD of the first season, which is his image. And I love that first season. I watched the second and I'm chasing down, I think there's a third one coming out, but whatever I've seen of him I've loved, and it was good that he had his own series. But apparently they're going to bring him back because they cancelled the show, and they keep cancelling the show, maybe for financial reasons, but I can never get enough Punisher. And then my review of him and Blade, I was looking at some comic book Punishers, which is how I first came across him. But I do remember that role being played by Dolph Lundgren back in the 80s. And I can't hardly remember what he did in that role as Punisher, what the story was. But I might try and hunt it down in a second-hand DVD shop and see if I can acquire it. So let's move on that pose to another one. So this is him on both knees. Again, I've tilted the head down towards the floor because I'm trying to imagine there's a victim there and he's beating the hell out of him, trying to get answers to the questions that has been bothering him about who murdered my wife and kids. But when I saw him in the last season of Daredevil, you know, I really liked it that those two teamed up together. And with hopefully the next season of Daredevil, I mentioned it before, it kind of reminded me of the Robert Pattinson film, in which it ended with a build-up of potential supervillains, and that Daredevil and Punisher were going to team up together to take them on in Hell's Kitchen. So that's that pose. Let's see if we can keep him on his knees, but I'll probably try and extend out one of his legs. Yeah, it does work, and I like that. Kind of similar to the way I had Daredevil posing, and I called it a bit Spider-Man-y, although he's not Spider-Man-y. And with Punisher, he doesn't have any powers. He's just a tough son of a gun, and is prepared to do anything to get his answers, even when he gets beaten up himself. He'd rather die than give in to anyone who comes at him. So I quite like that. Let's get a close-up of the face. And I do like that face. Its likeness is not bad for a figure at this level. And I certainly like that image of how they've done the skull on the body armour there. So yeah, that's a nice one. It's very easy to pose a figure when it's got a strong image, and Punisher does have a very strong image. So let's try. I might keep the same pose but just angle it differently for the camera. So let's see what that looks like. Like that one too. I kind of call this the kind of off balance pose, and don't have to explain why I call it that. I think it's self-evident, but it does work. And because the Daredevil and he have the same body type, you can pose Daredevil and pretty much know that you can get Punisher into the same sort of poses, which is what I like. Let's come in close. And I'm going to try and get his hand to reach that knife there and possibly tilt his head towards the floor. It's just curiosity more than anything. I have a catalogue of poses on every figure I have in my collection, and it's always good to pull those poses out of my head and see if it works or not. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. But it's all part of the fun, and that's not bad there. So let's try doing what I've just mentioned, tilting his head towards the floor and get his hand reaching towards his knife, which is at the rear of the figure. Not sure if it works really, but I had to give it a go. I've got him trying to reach that knife, but he can be a bit of a fiddly figure to pose, but when you finally get the pose you want, he does look really good. And Daredevil can have the same issues when it comes to certain poses you try and create. But when I go onto the internet and look on YouTube and see various collectors posing out Punisher or Daredevil, I quite like what they come up with. But I haven't seen anything like this, and certainly didn't see anything like that with my Daredevil poses. So hopefully these are some new things you haven't seen before. But I'm going to try another dynamic, and then I'm going to get him back on his feet. So let's pull that back and go to the next one. I'm coming in close now on this one. Now that lead leg was the bent knee on the last pose, so I've just reversed the process, but I think it gives you a better a chance to look at that knife, and I've seemed to get that closer to the knife, so it's a lot better in terms of pose. But I am my toughest critic, and I give this one probably a 3 out of 10 or maybe a 4, but it's all fun. Let's try and do something a little bit different to this, but before I do, I just want to come in on the other side, and the chances are we're probably going to finish under 15 minutes, because if I know me, I could go on all night, especially with figures with strong images like this guy, because there's things racing through my head all the time. But I don't want to drag it on too long. So let's try another one. So I quite like this because I've got that hand away from the knife now and got it stretching out towards camera, and it seems a better pose than the last one. But I'm going to quickly tilt his head down towards the floor, then I'm going to get him back on his feet. Didn't quite work the way I thought on camera. So I'm going to move on from this one. It goes that way sometimes. You might have something in your head, then you try it out, and then if you happen to want to film it, it looks completely different, but it's all part of the fun. So all I've done is I've kept the upper body the same, but I've got him back on his feet, and in my own weird head it seems to work. Now when I collect my figures and I look at your collections, I really love what you do. I think it's great. I have space issues and I have to be very patient about, well, very controlled about collecting too many figures, because you can't get to do things like this if you've got too much of a crowded display. And I'm not afraid to pose my figures like this, because a lot of the time figures are facing and looking at you and you can see their faces and their costumes, but I like to create a mood or a kind of dynamic in which you don't necessarily have to see them looking at you, and that to me is a good one. And when I do my next Grand Collectibles tour, you didn't see too much of this kind of thing, but I will start doing more of this sort of stuff. So you might not recognise the figure because he's got his head down, but if you're a collector of Marvel or DC, you're probably going to pick it up and understand who it is. I'm going to change the angle because I'm going to keep the pose just to see what that looks like. Not too bad, not as good as I thought, but I'm all for having a go. And so when you don't have weapons, or you did have a figure that didn't come with as many accessories, it's good to try these things, because when people buy their figures, they ignore the accessories. And when I had this, he came with his trigger hands, so immediately I put him into poses with weapons. But after a while, and I always do this with all my figures, I actually get out the other hands and see what I can come up with. So it's good practice, just in case you get bored of doing the old holding the weapons poses. You can do things like this, and I quite like how that looks. So I'm going to try another one. So it's the same pose, but I thought I'd just tilt the head right up now so you can see him, the Punisher, and it's nice to get it on camera and just get an angle shot. Okay, and let's move it on from there. So I had one in mind, and I'll see what it's going to be like before I put it on camera. If it doesn't work, you won't see it. If I'm happy with it, you will. So I was happy with it. I'm going to come in close. I'm not going to say anything right now. I'm going to do something else, and then I'll explain why I came up with this pose. Like that shot. I'm going to tweak it, and then I'll give you an explanation as to why he looks like this. So what I've done is basically coming in close. I've got that gesture hand covering the fighting fists, and I'm kind of imagining he's just beating the living daylights out of someone, and he's rubbing his sore knuckles, demanding answers to the questions that have been plaguing him in his nightmares. Who killed my wife and kids? Talk. There's another bad impression for you guys. Yesterday I did Bane. Oh no, sorry, 2 days ago I did Bane, and that was terrible. Then I followed it with Blade, and that was terrible. And now I followed it with Punisher. So I apologise to you, the viewer, or viewers. I don't know how many people are watching this, but yeah, that's the reason why he's kind of rubbing those knuckles. I'm going to square it on and keep the same pose. Yeah, I squared it on and I like that one better. Let's come back a bit further so you can get a sense of the overall effect. And I'm going to come in close on that figure there, rubbing his knuckles, and you can see that body armor with the skull on it, and that's not bad. I've never posed him like this, and if you wanted to stop all doing complicated poses, you could quite easily just put him like this and that would be enough next to Daredevil. Let's go around the side. Yeah, I do like it. It's growing on me. So we're coming to the end, and yeah, I went over 20 minutes with Daredevil. We're on the 16-minute mark now, so hopefully this will be a shorter one than the Daredevil review. Yeah, before I moved on from this pose, I just wanted to tilt his head up just to see what that looked like. I kind of like the one where his head is down, it's got a mood to it, but I thought it's nice to have a go. And I'll try one more, but a side-on view of the figure. Right then, let's go for it. So that's the side-on view. Coming in close. And I've posed him so you can see the sidearm. I'll turn him around the other way so you can see the knife. Right, let's turn him around. So this is the other side. I just drop the camera a little bit so you can see that knife. And I think that's a Special Forces badge. Let's try and focus it. That's the best I can do. And I'm going to show the back of the figure because I did that with Daredevil, so I might as well do that with this figure. So coming in close now, tilted his head to one side, and you can see there, that's where you holster his knife. And I like to have a go at things, so I actually got his axe to kind of fit loosely in that knife position while he was holding the knife. So sometimes that's a pose I will try and do from time to time. But there's the body armor, close up on that. And there's a view of the sidearm he comes with. So we'll turn the figure around. Let's try the angle on that just to see what that looks like. Not bad. And I'll come back to the front, or the back should I say, and start to wind it down. So I wanted to flare it up a little bit because we're coming to the end of this review, and quite like it. Not too bad. Let's come around the side there. Okay, nearly at the end now. So if you've been watching this, thanks for persevering with me. And let's see what we can do to wind this up. So here's another one for you. And to be honest, it's not my best, but it's a review on how to kind of get some ideas for your own figures when you're not posing them with weapons. And I'm quite pleased with this overall review because obviously he's at his best with his weapons, just as Daredevil is at his best when he's using his billy sticks. But should you get bored of doing those sort of poses, you can also pull out your spare hand accessories and try out some things like this. So I'm very pleased that I can go to these poses if I stop posing him or Daredevil with weapons. So we're going to wind it up with the final pose. So guys, that's your final one. I'll call this my kicking down the door pose. Unlike the first one, which is more like a martial arts kick, I won't pose it for much longer like this because I think he might fall down. It's all about the balance. But I would like to thank all of you if you've tuned into the channel. And I'll say thanks for watching. And I'll see you again next time.